Have you ever dreamed of success, but found yourself doing nothing about it? You talk about tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes. This is the story of Jake, a man with big dreams, but even bigger laziness. Until one day, a simple lesson forced him to choose: ambition or weeds. And his choice changed his life forever. Let's explore the following story with awakened wisdom. In the heart of the Midwest, in a small farming town where the air smelled of fresh earth and the horizon stretched endlessly with cornfields, lived a young man named Jake Thompson. At 25, Jake was strong, healthy, and full of bold dreams. He often sat on the front porch of his family's old farmhouse, leaning back in his chair, eyes fixed on the distant fields, and told anyone who would listen, "One day, I'll be the richest farmer in this county. My fields will shine golden with wheat, and people will come to me for advice. Everyone will know my name." The neighbors admired his confidence. His friends laughed and nodded, impressed by the grandness of his words. Jake spoke with such certainty that sometimes even he believed his future was already guaranteed. He carried himself like a man destined for greatness. But beneath the surface of his ambition lay a dangerous truth. Jake was lazy. While the farmers of the town woke at sunrise, their boots already muddy before breakfast, Jake was still buried under his blankets. While neighbors sweated under the blazing sun, Jake sat in the shade playing games on his phone or talking endlessly about his plans. While the women hauled water from the well and the men worked the plows, Jake shrugged and said, "I'll do it tomorrow." Tomorrow became his favorite word. The farmland he had inherited from his late father was fertile and rich. It had the potential to produce enough crops to feed an entire family, maybe even make him wealthy if he worked hard enough. But the field stayed empty, dry and lifeless. Each day, Jake repeated the same promise. "Tomorrow I'll start. Tomorrow everything changes." And each day, nothing happened. His father had once been a respected farmer, known for his discipline and relentless work ethic. But those values had not taken root in Jake. The more he dreamed, the less he acted. The more he spoke of ambition, the more laziness crept in. Neighbors whispered. Some said Jake was wasting his youth. Others shook their heads and muttered that a man who sleeps while the sun works will never harvest anything worth keeping. Jake pretended not to hear, but deep down, he knew they were right. Then one evening, as the sky burned orange with sunset and the cicadas hummed in the fields, Jake's uncle, Uncle Roy, came to visit. Roy was an old farmer, his skin leathered by years under the sun, his hands rough with calluses, his back bent but still strong. He had lived through droughts, floods, and seasons of abundance. More than anyone else, he knew what farming and life truly demanded. He walked slowly across Jake's property, his boots crunching against the dry soil. He looked at the empty fields, shook his head, and sighed. Turning to Jake, who sat lazily on the porch with a glass of soda in hand, Uncle Roy asked, "Jake, why is your land empty? You talk about golden fields, but all I see is dust." Jake laughed, waving his hand dismissively. "Don't worry, Uncle. I'll start tomorrow. Just wait. You'll see. My fields will be the best in the county." Roy studied his nephew quietly. He had heard that word, tomorrow, too many times. He knew it for the lie it was, a promise that kept pushing life further and further away. And in that moment, Roy decided it was time to teach Jake a lesson he would never forget. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Roy reached into the pocket of his worn overalls and pulled out 2 small cloth bags. He stepped onto the porch, placed them on the table in front of Jake, and said in a firm but gentle voice, "Inside these bags are seeds. But they are not ordinary seeds, Jake. They are symbols. One bag holds the seeds of ambition, the other holds the seeds of laziness. Whichever you plant and care for will take over your land and your life." Jake sat up, finally interested. He looked at the 2 bags curiously. "So what happens if I plant ambition?" Roy smiled faintly. "If you water it every day, it will grow strong. It will give you harvest, shade, wealth, and respect. But if you ignore it, it will die. Ambition needs effort." Jake picked up the second bag. "And laziness?" Roy's eyes darkened. Laziness grows on its own. You don't have to water it. You don't have to care for it. It spreads like weeds, and once it covers your field, it destroys everything else in its path. Jake chuckled nervously. Well, that's easy then. Of course I'll plant ambition. Why would I ever choose laziness? Uncle Roy didn't laugh. He looked Jake straight in the eye and said, Your future depends on which one you water. Remember that. The next morning, long before dawn, the small town of Westfield was already alive with movement. Roosters crowed. Tractor engines rumbled in the distance. Farmers pulled on their boots, tied their gloves, and stepped into the cool morning air to begin another day's work. The land demanded discipline, and the people answered with sweat. But not Jake Thompson. While others marched toward their fields, Jake was still buried under the comfort of his quilt, his alarm clock ringing uselessly on the nightstand. He groaned, slapped it off, and muttered his favorite word, tomorrow. With that single promise, he drifted back to sleep, believing the morning belonged to him. When he finally stumbled out of bed hours later, the sun was already high. He shuffled to the porch, still in yesterday's shirt, sipping a soda while neighbors bent their backs in the blazing heat. He watched them for a while, the sight almost making him uncomfortable, then shrugged and pulled out his phone. Scrolling through social media was easier than working. Talking about dreams was easier than sweating for them. He liked to imagine himself on the cover of a farming magazine, standing tall in a field of gold. He liked to tell his friends at the diner about the new equipment he planned to buy once his harvest made him rich. His words painted a future so vivid that even Jake almost believed it. But words, unlike crops, don't grow just because you plant them in conversation. Day after day, his fields remained bare. No rows of corn, no green shoots of wheat, just empty soil baking in the sun. When neighbors passed by, they shook their heads. That boy's father worked himself to the bone for this land, one man muttered. Now look at it, wasted. Jake pretended not to hear, but sometimes, at night, lying awake in bed, he felt the sting of their judgment. He would whisper to himself, They'll see. I'll prove them wrong. Just not today. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll start. The cycle repeated endlessly. Each morning brought a new excuse. Too tired, too hot, too busy. He convinced himself that the timing wasn't right, that success would be easier once he felt ready. But readiness never came. Instead, laziness grew inside him like a shadow, stretching across every corner of his life. His uncle's words about the seeds echoed faintly in his mind, but Jake laughed them off. Seeds can wait, fields can wait, dreams can wait. But laziness never waits. Soon, Jake's habits began to show. His bills piled up because he forgot to pay them on time. His house grew messy because he never cleaned. Promises to friends, help with repairs, join them at church, lend a hand on their farms, were broken again and again. With each broken word, respect for Jake slipped away, just like dry soil crumbling beneath his boots. Even his health started to bear the cost. Sleeping until noon left him groggy. Eating junk food instead of real meals drained his energy. He was only 25, but he felt older, heavier, slower. Yet even as his body protested, his mouth kept promising, tomorrow. The saddest part was not the empty fields or the wasted time. It was the way Jake's ambition turned into entertainment. His dreams became stories he told to make himself feel good, not goals he worked toward. He was the hero of tales told over coffee at the diner, the star of a life he never lived. But deep down, something gnawed at him. Every time he looked out at his land, wide and fertile, he felt a small ache in his chest. It was as though the earth itself was whispering, "You're wasting me, you're wasting yourself." Still, Jake clung to his excuses. He convinced himself that greatness could be postponed, that ambition was like money in the bank, safe until he chose to spend it. He didn't realize that every day he delayed, laziness was planting itself deeper, spreading invisible roots through his life. And soon, those roots would break the surface for all to see. The summer heat was unforgiving. Days stretched long, the air heavy with the scent of soil and hay. While most farmers sweated beneath the sun, Jake spent his afternoons leaning on the porch railing, scrolling on his phone or sipping another can of soda. His land remained empty, mocking him with its silence. It was on one of these sweltering evenings that Uncle Roy returned. The old man's boots left deep prints in the dusty ground as he crossed the field. His face was lined with decades of labor, his shoulders stooped yet unbroken by time. He paused at the edge of Jake's barren property and gazed across the wasted soil, the corners of his mouth tight with disappointment. When he finally reached the porch, he found Jake lounging in a chair, one leg draped lazily over the other, as though the world owed him comfort. Roy didn't waste time. "Jake," he said, his voice gravelly but strong, "why does this land look the same as last month? You've got rich soil, the kind men would kill for, yet I see nothing but weeds." Jake gave his usual chuckle, the same hollow laugh that masked his guilt. "Don't worry, Uncle. I'll start tomorrow. Just wait, you'll see. My fields will be the pride of this county." Roy's eyes narrowed. He had heard this script too many times. Each tomorrow was a lie Jake told himself to avoid today's effort. The old man lowered himself onto the chair beside Jake with a sigh. Then, after a long pause, he reached into the pocket of his faded overalls and pulled out 2 small cloth bags. He placed them carefully on the table between them. The bags were worn but tied neatly with twine. Jake raised an eyebrow. "What's this? More of your tricks to get me out into the dirt?" Roy didn't smile. "These are seeds," he said, "but not the kind you're thinking of. They're symbols. In this bag," he tapped the first one, "are the seeds of ambition. If you plant them and care for them every single day, they'll grow into something strong, a tree that gives fruit, shade, and wealth." Jake reached for the second bag. "And this one?" Roy's voice grew heavy. "That one holds the seeds of laziness. You don't even have to water them. Plant them, ignore them, and they'll spread across your whole field like weeds. They'll choke out everything else. They'll take over your life." Jake chuckled nervously. "That's easy then. I'll plant ambition. Why would anyone choose laziness?" Roy leaned closer, his weathered hands folded on the table. His eyes locked on Jake's, sharp and unyielding. "It's not about choosing, Jake. It's about what you care for. Laziness doesn't need permission. It grows on its own. Ambition needs discipline. Every day you delay, you water laziness. Every time you say tomorrow, you're feeding the wrong seed." The words hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time in a long while, Jake had no clever reply. He stared at the bags, then at the field beyond the porch. In his imagination, he could already see the golden crops, the recognition, the wealth he always bragged about. But now he also saw something else. Thick weeds creeping across the soil, swallowing his dreams whole. He swallowed hard. "So, what do I do?" Roy pushed the bags toward him. "Your future is in your hands. The question isn't which seed you plant. The question is which one you water." Jake hesitated, turning the bags over in his hands. They felt light, almost insignificant, yet the weight of their meaning pressed on him. Part of him wanted to believe this was just an old man's metaphor. But another part, deep down, the part that still remembered his father's hard work, knew there was truth in every word. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and red. As shadows stretched across the porch, Roy stood, placing a firm hand on Jake's shoulder. "I can't make the choice for you, son. I've seen too many men lose their lives to the weeds of laziness. Don't be one of them." With that, Uncle Roy turned and walked back across the field, his silhouette fading into the glow of the setting sun. Jake sat alone, the 2 bags still on the table. He untied one, spilling a few small seeds into his palm. They looked ordinary, just tiny, lifeless kernels. But as he rolled them between his fingers, he couldn't shake his uncle's words. "Your future depends on which one you water." He clenched his fist around the seeds, staring out at his empty land. For the first time, the silence of his fields didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a warning. At first, Jake told himself he would do exactly what Uncle Roy had suggested. He would plant the seeds of ambition, water them daily, and prove everyone wrong. He could already imagine the strong stalks rising from the soil, the golden fields stretching far beyond the horizon. But when morning came, the same battle began. The alarm rang at 5, just as the farmers of Westfield headed out to their fields. Jake groaned, rolled over, and whispered the word that had become his curse. Tomorrow. One day slipped into the next. Each sunrise brought new resolve. Each night ended with another excuse. And then, one lazy afternoon, out of boredom more than discipline, Jake finally walked out to the field with the 2 small bags in hand. He stood in the middle of the empty soil, the sun beating down on his back, and laughed at himself. Why not? Let's see what happens. Instead of choosing, he planted both bags. Seeds of ambition on one side, seeds of laziness on the other. He told himself it was harmless, just an experiment. Besides, he could always take care of them later. But later never came. Jake didn't water the ambition seeds. He didn't pull the weeds from the laziness seeds. He simply forgot, distracted by games on his phone, late-night movies, long naps, and endless chatter at the diner. The field faded from his mind, replaced by empty conversations about what he would accomplish someday. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, while cutting across his land, Jake stopped in his tracks. His mouth fell open. The field was no longer empty. Thick, ugly weeds had exploded from the soil, their roots twisting deep, their stalks tall and choking. They covered nearly every inch of the field, spreading faster than Jake could have imagined. The sight was overwhelming, suffocating, like a living jungle of failure. In the middle of it all, barely visible, was a frail green sprout. One of the ambition seeds had fought to grow. But without water, without care, it was weak, pale, and nearly dying. The weeds surrounded it, stealing its sunlight, draining its life. Jake dropped to his knees, his heart pounding. He pushed the weeds aside and touched the fragile sprout with trembling fingers. It bent under his touch, so fragile it seemed ready to snap. His uncle's voice echoed in his mind. Ambition needs care. Laziness grows on its own. The truth hit him like a stone to the chest. He had fed laziness every single day, through every excuse, every nap, every tomorrow. He hadn't needed to water those seeds. His neglect was enough. And in the process, he had starved his ambition. The realization was brutal. He looked around and saw not just weeds, but the reflection of his own life. Promises broken, dreams neglected, potential suffocated. That evening, Uncle Roy returned. His boots crunched against the overgrown soil as he stepped into the field. He didn't need to say anything. The evidence was everywhere. He gazed at the choking weeds, then at the single struggling sprout, and finally at Jake, who sat in the dirt with tears welling in his eyes. Roy shook his head slowly. Jake, this is your life. Ambition is fragile. It needs effort, water, and discipline. Without them, it dies. Laziness doesn't ask for your permission. It grows on its own, fast and strong, until it destroys everything else. Jake's chest tightened. His throat ached. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. All he could see was the truth in front of him. A field overtaken by weeds, a dream withering in silence. He buried his face in his hands. For the first time in his life, he wasn't laughing, wasn't bragging, wasn't making promises about tomorrow. For the first time, he felt the crushing weight of wasted time. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruined field, Jake whispered into the darkness, barely audible. "What have I done?" The weeds rustled in the wind, as if mocking him. The fragile sprout swayed, fighting to survive. And deep inside, Jake knew that unless he changed, laziness would claim not just his field, but his future. That night, Jake lay in bed wide awake. The ceiling above him felt heavy, as though the weight of his entire wasted life pressed down on it. The image of the weeds wouldn't leave his mind. The way they had spread effortlessly, the way the small sprout of ambition had nearly suffocated. He turned restlessly from side to side, beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool night air. For the first time, Jake wasn't comforted by his favorite word. Tomorrow. It no longer sounded like hope. It sounded like a curse. His father's voice came back to him, faint but sharp. Discipline is the farmer's wealth. Without it, the land eats you alive. And then Uncle Roy's words echoed, "Every time you delay, you water laziness. Every tomorrow feeds the weeds." Jake realized he had spent years feeding the wrong seed, not with water or care, but with neglect, with excuses, with wasted hours. His ambition hadn't died because he lacked dreams. It had died because he never acted on them. He sat up, his heart pounding. For the first time in years, fear cut through his chest. Not fear of hard work, but fear of a future where laziness consumed everything. Jake whispered to himself, his voice trembling in the silence of the night. "If I don't change now, laziness will own me forever." The next morning, long before dawn, Jake did something he hadn't done in years. He got up when the alarm rang. His body protested, heavy with fatigue, but he forced his feet to the floor. The sky was still dark, the air crisp and cool. He walked out into the field with nothing but his bare hands and a determination he barely recognized in himself. The weeds stood tall, a jungle of failure mocking him. He took a deep breath and grabbed the nearest stalk. It resisted, roots buried deep. His back strained, his hands burned, but finally it tore free, leaving his palms scratched and bleeding. He dropped it on the ground and went for the next one, then the next. Hour after hour, he pulled weeds. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, his knees ached, his arms shook. But with every weed he ripped from the soil, Jake felt something else tearing away inside him. The excuses, the empty promises, the years of laziness. By sunrise, he had cleared only a small patch of the field. But for Jake, it felt like an entire victory. He looked at his bleeding hands and whispered, "This is what ambition costs." Over the next days, Jake returned to the field again and again. He woke before the sun, no longer hiding under his blankets. Each morning, he battled the weeds. Each afternoon, he watered the fragile sprout of ambition, watching as it slowly grew stronger. Neighbors who had once mocked him paused by the edge of his property. They saw the sweat dripping from his forehead, the blisters on his palms, the dirt covering his clothes. For the first time, they didn't laugh. They nodded silently, some even tipping their hats in respect. The transformation wasn't instant. Many mornings, Jake still fought the temptation to sleep in. Some days, the weeds seemed endless, sprouting faster than he could pull. There were moments he wanted to quit, moments when his back ached so badly he thought he couldn't stand. But every time he considered giving up, he remembered the dying sprout, the image of ambition suffocating under laziness. That picture drove him harder than any dream of wealth or success. Weeks turned into months. The field slowly changed. The weeds retreated under Jake's relentless work. The sprout grew taller, its leaves stretching wide, its roots strong in the soil. With care and effort, it became a sturdy plant, then a young tree. Jake changed too. His shoulders grew broader from the labor. His hands, once soft and idle, grew rough and calloused. His face, once smug with lazy confidence, carried a new seriousness. He spoke less, worked more. One evening, as the sun set behind the horizon, Jake stood at the edge of his field. His clothes were soaked with sweat, his body exhausted, but his eyes shone with something new: pride. Not the hollow pride of boasting, but the pride of action, of discipline, of hard-earned progress. He realized then that ambition wasn't about dreaming big. It was about working small, every single day, no matter how tired, no matter how hard. Jake finally understood. Success wasn't promised tomorrow. It was built today. Years passed, and the once barren land that had mocked Jake was unrecognizable. Where weeds had once ruled, golden waves of wheat now swayed in the breeze. The small sprout of ambition that had nearly died had grown into a mighty tree at the edge of the field, its branches heavy with fruit, its shade wide enough for tired workers to rest beneath. The people of Westfield, who once mocked Jake for his laziness, now came to his farm with admiration. They stopped at the fence lines to marvel at the neat rows of crops, the richness of the soil, the strength of the harvest. They nodded to him with respect, their whispers no longer carrying judgment, but awe. Jake himself had changed beyond recognition. His once soft hands were hardened with calluses, proof of years of work. His back, once bent from slouching and idleness, was now upright, steady, proud. The boy who had once lived on promises of tomorrow had become a man of action today. One summer afternoon, as the harvest was being brought in, Uncle Roy returned. His steps were slower now, his hair whiter, his body frailer with age. But when he reached Jake's farm and saw the transformation, his face lit with pride. He stood beside Jake at the edge of the golden fields, the sun casting long shadows behind them. For a long while, neither spoke. They simply looked at the land, the proof of change, the reward of discipline. Finally, Uncle Roy broke the silence. "Jake, you fought laziness and you won. Not everyone does. Most men lose that battle before they even begin. But you," he gestured at the fields, "you chose to water ambition, and now it feeds you." Jake's throat tightened. He looked at his uncle, then back at the field, and felt tears burn in his eyes. He remembered the nights of excuses, the mornings wasted, the weeds choking his land, the shame of failure. And he remembered the pain of pulling those weeds, the blood on his hands, the endless days of discipline. All of it had led here. He whispered, more to himself than to anyone else, "Dreams are nothing without action. Action is the water that keeps them alive." Uncle Roy nodded slowly. "That's the truth most people never learn. They think ambition is enough, but ambition is only a seed. Without daily effort, it dies. Laziness grows by itself, Jake. You've seen it. But now, you've seen the other side, too." The old man placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Never forget this. Every day, you're planting something. Every day, you're watering something. The question is, what is it, laziness or ambition?" Jake took a deep breath, the golden field stretching before him like an ocean of triumph. He knew the answer now. He knew it in his bones, in his calloused hands, in the sweat that had poured from his body day after day. He turned to his uncle and smiled, not with arrogance, but with gratitude. "From now on, Uncle, I know exactly which one I'll water." The lesson had carved itself into his soul. Laziness demanded nothing but gave nothing worth keeping. Ambition demanded everything, but gave life, pride, and meaning in return. That night, as Jake sat beneath the tree of ambition, its branches swaying gently in the wind, he reflected on his journey. He thought about the boy who once lived in excuses, the man he had become, and the people still trapped in the weeds of laziness. He wished they could see what he saw, feel what he felt. Because in the end, ambition wasn't just about wealth or respect. It was about freedom. The freedom to live a life built, not imagined. And so, his story became more than his own. It became a parable for everyone who ever whispered tomorrow instead of acting today. For every man or woman sitting on a dream, Jake's fields whispered the truth with every rustle of wheat. Every one of us carries two seeds inside, laziness and ambition. Laziness grows by itself. Ambition needs care, effort, and daily action. The seed you water is the life you will live. Jake's journey is more than a farming story. It's a mirror of our own lives. Every one of us carries two seeds inside, ambition and laziness. Ambition is fragile. It doesn't grow simply because we dream about it. It needs water in the form of action, sunlight in the form of discipline, and care in the form of consistency. Without those, ambition withers, no matter how big the dream. Laziness, on the other hand, is dangerous because it requires nothing from us. It grows on its own. Every time we delay, every time we say tomorrow, every time we choose comfort over effort, we water laziness. And once it takes root, it spreads like weeds, suffocating the very dreams we claim to love. Jake's transformation teaches us that success isn't about sudden miracles. It's about the painful daily decision to pull weeds, to resist excuses, and to water ambition even when it feels hopeless. Over time, those small actions compound into a life that others respect and admire. The message is simple but powerful. The seed you water is the life you will live. So ask yourself today, are you feeding weeds? Or are you growing a tree that will one day bear fruit for you and those you love? If Jake's story lit a fire inside you, don't let it fade. Hit that like button. It tells us you want more stories that push you to grow. Drop a comment below. What's the biggest weed of laziness in your life? And what's one action you'll take today to fight it? And don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story could be the one that changes everything for you. Imagine this. A year from now, you look back and realize you started today. You chose ambition over laziness, and that single choice transformed your life. So here's your challenge. Don't wait for tomorrow. Start now. Like, comment, share this video with a friend who needs the push, and keep walking this journey of discipline and success with us. Together, we're not just watching stories, we're writing our own.